I lost my BF and best friend in one night when I caught them together. Years later, she reveals how he manipulated us both and now he's back causing chaos. I, 28F, never thought I'd be sharing this story, but I need some outside perspective on a complicated situation involving my ex-boyfriend Steven, 30M, and my former best friend Nancy, 29F. It all started about 4 years ago, but the roots of this story go back much further. I met Nancy when we were both 14, on the first day of high school. We bonded instantly over our shared love of fantasy books and our mutual hatred of PE class. From that day on, we were inseparable. We helped each other through the ups and downs of teenage life. First crushes, family drama, academic stress. When Nancy's parents went through a nasty divorce during our junior year, I was the one who held her while she cried and helped her pack up her childhood home. And when my mom was diagnosed with breast cancer in our senior year, Nancy was right there with me, bringing over homemade meals and distracting me with terrible rom-coms. After high school, we went to different colleges but stayed close. We called each other every week and spent every school break together. When we graduated, we both moved back to our hometown and got an apartment together. It felt like everything was falling into place. We had our dream jobs. Me as a graphic designer, Nancy as an elementary school teacher, our cozy little apartment, and each other. I truly thought Nancy would be my best friend for life. Then, about 4 years ago, I met Steven. It was a classic meet cute at a local coffee shop. I was working on a freelance project, he was reading a book I loved, and we struck up a conversation. Steven was charming, funny, and seemed genuinely interested in everything I had to say. We exchanged numbers and started texting constantly. Our first date was magical. Steven took me to a little hole-in-the-wall Italian restaurant and we talked for hours. He told me about growing up in a small town, his dreams of starting his own business, and his volunteer work at an animal shelter. I was smitten. Things progressed quickly from there. Within a few months, Steven and I were officially a couple. I introduced him to Nancy early on, wanting my best friend's approval. They seemed to hit it off right away, bonding over their shared love of obscure indie bands. The three of us started hanging out regularly. Movie nights, game nights, weekend trips. It felt perfect. But about 6 months into my relationship with Steven, things started to feel off. Steven began canceling plans at the last minute, always with a work excuse. When we did spend time together, he was constantly on his phone. If I asked who he was texting, he'd get defensive and accuse me of not trusting him. I tried to talk to Nancy about my concerns, but she brushed them off. She said I was being paranoid and that Steven was obviously crazy about me. Looking back, I should have seen the signs, but I trusted Nancy's judgment. She had always been the more level-headed one in our friendship. Things came to a heat about 8 months into my relationship with Steven. We had plans for a fancy date night to celebrate my promotion at work. An hour before he was supposed to pick me up, Steven texted saying he had to work late. I was upset but decided to treat myself to a nice dinner out anyway. I went to this upscale bistro that had just opened downtown. As I walked in, my heart stopped. There, at a corner table, were Steven and Nancy. They were holding hands across the table, looking at each other with unmistakable affection. They didn't notice me at first, and I saw Steven lean in to brush a strand of hair out of Nancy's face. I don't remember deciding to walk over to their table. Suddenly, I was just there, staring down at them. The look of shock and guilt on their faces told me everything I needed to know. Steven started sputtering excuses. It wasn't what it looked like. They were just having a friendly dinner, etc. But Nancy, to her credit, didn't try to lie. She burst into tears and admitted they had been seeing each other behind my back for months. I felt like I had been punched in the stomach. The two people I trusted most in the world had betrayed me in the worst way possible. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. I just turned and ran out of the restaurant. The next few weeks were a blur. I moved out of the apartment I shared with Nancy and crashed on my parents' couch. I ignored the constant calls and texts from both Steven and Nancy. I called out sick from work and barely got out of bed. The betrayal felt like a physical wound. Eventually, I had to face reality. I met with Steven and Nancy separately to get closure. Steven tried to blame Nancy, saying she had seduced him and he had been too weak to resist. Nancy claimed Steven had pursued her relentlessly, and she had developed real feelings for him. I didn't know who to believe, and ultimately, it didn't matter. I ended my relationship with Steven and told Nancy our friendship was over. The next year was the hardest of my life. I threw myself into work, taking on extra projects to keep busy. I started seeing a therapist to work through my trust issues. I avoided any place I might run into Steven or Nancy. It was lonely, but I was slowly healing. Then, about a year after the incident, Steven reached out. He said he and Nancy had broken up, and he realized what a huge mistake he had made. He begged for forgiveness and another chance. Part of me, the part that still missed him, wanted to hear him out. But I knew I could never trust him again. I told him not to contact me and blocked his number. Life went on. I made new friends through work and a local art class. I even went on a few dates, though nothing serious. I was finally starting to feel like myself again. Which brings us to last week. I was at a work conference out of town when I literally bumped into Nancy in the hotel lobby. She looked as shocked to see me as I felt. After a moment of awkward silence, she asked if we could talk. Against my better judgment, I agreed to grab coffee with her the next morning. Nancy broke down almost immediately. She gave me a long, tearful apology for betraying our friendship. She said she had been in a bad place mentally when the affair with Steven started, feeling stuck in her teaching job, dealing with her dad's declining health, and struggling with anxiety. She knew it was wrong, but said she got in too deep before she knew how to get out. Nancy told me Steven had become controlling and manipulative during their relationship. She said he would often compare her unfavorably to me, saying things like, "Well, OP would never do that," or "OP was so much better at this." She said he played mind games, threatening to tell me about the affair one minute and then professing his love the next. According to Nancy, she had been in therapy for the past year working through everything. She said she missed our friendship terribly and wanted to know if there was any chance I could forgive her. She understood if I couldn't, but she wanted me to know how sorry she was. I was overwhelmed by everything Nancy told me. Part of me wanted to tell her to get lost. She had her chance at friendship and she blew it. But seeing how genuinely remorseful she seemed made me pause. We had been best friends for so long, through so much. Was it possible to come back from this level of betrayal? I told Nancy I needed time to process everything and would think about what she said. It's been a week now, and I'm still torn. On one hand, Nancy was my best friend for so many years. We shared so many important life moments together. I miss having that close female friendship. And it does seem like she's done a lot of work on herself. But on the other hand, the betrayal was so deep and painful. I'm not sure I can ever fully trust her again. And even if we did reconcile, things would never be the same between us. There would always be that history hanging over our heads. I'm also worried that letting Nancy back into my life could open the door for Steven to try to come back as well. I've worked hard to move on and build a new life for myself over the past few years. I'm in a good place now and don't want to risk backsliding. I guess I'm looking for some outside perspectives on this situation. Am I crazy for even considering forgiving Nancy? Or is it worth trying to salvage a friendship that was so important to me for so long? How would I even begin to rebuild trust? Any advice would be appreciated as I try to figure out how to move forward. Update 1. It's been about a month since my last post, and I wanted to provide an update on the situation. With Nancy. First, I want to thank everyone who took the time to comment and offer advice. Your perspectives really helped me gain some clarity. After much deliberation, I decided to meet up with Nancy again to have a more in-depth conversation. We met at a quiet cafe in a part of town we didn't usually frequent, to minimize the chance of running into anyone we knew. As soon as Nancy walked in, I was struck by how different she looked from the last time I'd seen her. She seemed more put together, more confident somehow. We talked for hours, diving deep into everything that had happened. Nancy shared more details about her relationship with Steven, and honestly, it was worse than I had imagined. Apparently, Steven had been manipulating both of us for a long time, playing us against each other and lying constantly. Nancy showed me text messages and emails from Steven that revealed just how deceitful he had been. He would tell Nancy that I was clingy and unstable, then turn around and tell me that Nancy was jealous of our relationship. There were messages where he told Nancy he was planning to break up with me, and others where he was promising me a future together. It was clear he had been gaslighting both of us to keep us under his control. One message in particular stood out. It was from Steven to Nancy, sent just a few days before I caught them together at the restaurant. In it, he told Nancy that I was becoming too needy and that he was planning to end things with me soon. He said he wanted to be with Nancy, but needed to figure out the right way to break up with me first. Reading that message brought back all the pain and confusion of that night. Learning the full extent of Steven's manipulation made me realize that while Nancy had certainly made mistakes, she had also been a victim in many ways. It didn't excuse her betrayal, but it did help me understand how things had spiraled so out of control. Nancy also shared more about her mental health struggles. She had been dealing with depression and anxiety for years, even before the affair started. The stress of her job, apparently her school had been facing budget cuts and she was worried about losing her position, combined with her dad's declining health, had pushed her to a breaking point. She said Steven had initially seemed like an escape from all the stress, but quickly became another source of anxiety. Nancy told me she had finally gotten professional help about a year ago. She was on medication now and seeing a therapist regularly. Seeing how much healthier and more stable she seemed now versus a few years ago was eye-opening. We also talked about our friendship before everything fell apart. Nancy reminded me of times she had been there for me that I had almost forgotten. Like when she skipped a weekend trip with her college friends to help me move into my first solo apartment, or when she spent hours helping me prepare for a big job interview. It brought back a lot of good memories that had been overshadowed by the betrayal. After our long talk, I told Nancy that while I wasn't ready to jump back into a close friendship, I was open to slowly rebuilding a relationship. We agreed to take things very slowly and set clear boundaries. For now, we're just grabbing coffee every couple of weeks and catching up. It's been strange but nice to have Nancy back in my life in a limited capacity. We're both being very careful and honest with each other. I'm still guarded, but I can feel some of the old connection we used to have. We've been sharing updates about our lives. Nancy recently adopted a rescue dog, and I've been telling her about a big project I'm working on at my job. The most unexpected development came last week when I got a call from Steven. Apparently, he had heard through mutual friends that Nancy and I were in contact again. He launched into this whole speech about how he had changed and wanted us all to be friends again. He said he had made mistakes but had learned from them, and he missed having both of us in his life. I shut that down immediately. I told Steven in no uncertain terms that I wanted nothing to do with him ever again. His manipulation and lies had caused so much pain, and I had zero interest in letting him back into my life. I reminded him of all the hurtful things he had said and done, and told him that no amount of supposed change could make up for that. I blocked his number and on all social media right after. When I told Nancy about Steven's call, she was really supportive. She agreed he was toxic and said she had no desire to ever speak to him again either. It felt good to be on the same page about that. Nancy also offered to block Steven on her end too, to make sure he couldn't use her to get information about me. So for now, I'm cautiously optimistic about rebuilding a friendship with Nancy. We're taking it day by day and being very open about our feelings. I'm still not sure if we'll ever get back to where we once were, but I'm glad I gave her a chance to explain and apologize. I know some people think I'm crazy for even considering forgiving Nancy, but I'm trying to listen to my gut. Life is short, and sometimes second chances are worth giving. That being said, I'm still proceeding with caution. I'm not letting Nancy all the way back into my life yet, and I'm being very mindful of my own boundaries and feelings. I'll be sure to update again if there are any major developments. Thanks again to everyone for the support and advice. Update 2. It's been about 6 months since my last update, and I wanted to share some new developments in my situation with Nancy and Steven. A lot has changed, and I'm still processing everything. My cautious reconciliation with Nancy has continued to progress slowly but steadily. We've been meeting up more regularly, usually once a week for coffee or a walk in the park. It's been nice to have her back in my life, even if our relationship isn't quite what it used to be. We've been catching up on the past few years, sharing stories about work, family, and our personal lives. One major change is that I've started dating someone new. His name is Alex, 31 now, and we met through a mutual friend about 3 months ago. He's kind, funny, and respectful. Everything Steven wasn't. I was hesitant to start a new relationship at first, given my past experiences, but Alex has been patient and understanding. When I first told Alex about my history with Steven and Nancy, I was nervous about his reaction. To my relief, he was incredibly supportive. He listened without judgment and asked thoughtful questions about how I was feeling now. Alex even offered to go with me to meet Nancy if I ever wanted that extra support. His understanding and support have meant the world to me. When I told Nancy about Alex, I was a bit nervous about her reaction. To my relief, she was genuinely happy for me. She even offered to meet him if I wanted, saying she'd love to get to know the person making me happy. Her supportive response meant a lot and showed me how much she's grown. However, not everything has been smooth sailing. Last month, I ran into Steven at a local bar. I was out with some work friends when I spotted him across the room. At first, I tried to ignore him, hoping he wouldn't notice me. But as the night went on, Steven got visibly drunk and started making a scene. He stumbled over to our table and started loudly accusing me of turning Nancy against him. He said some nasty things about both of us, calling me manipulative and Nancy a traitor. My friends tried to intervene, but Steven was getting more agitated. Finally, the bouncer had to escort him out. The whole incident left me shaken. It brought back a lot of painful memories and reminded me of why I had cut Steven out of my life in the first place. My friends were supportive, but they were also confused. I hadn't told many people about what had happened with Steven and Nancy. The next day, Steven started bombarding me with text messages and voicemails. They alternated between angry rants and tearful apologies. He would accuse me of ruining his life one minute, then beg for forgiveness the next. It was exhausting and brought up a lot of old feelings I thought I had dealt with. I tried blocking his number, but he just created new accounts to contact me from. I ended up having to change my phone number to get him to stop. It was a hassle, but it felt necessary for my peace of mind. Nancy was incredibly supportive throughout this whole ordeal. When I told her about the incident at the bar, she listened patiently and offered words of encouragement. She shared some of her own experiences with Steven's erratic behavior after their breakup, which helped me feel less alone. Nancy even offered to reach out to Steven herself to tell him to back off, but I asked her not to. I didn't want to create any more drama or give Steven another way to try to worm his way back into our lives. Instead, Nancy helped me brainstorm practical ways to deal with the situation, like changing my number and adjusting my social media privacy settings. Her unwavering support during this difficult time has gone a long way in rebuilding my trust in her. On a more positive note, I've been making an effort to expand my social circle beyond just Nancy. I've joined a local book club and a yoga class, which has helped me meet new people and develop new interests. It's been refreshing to form friendships that aren't complicated by past drama. In the book club, I've connected with a woman named Sarah who shares my love for mystery novels. We've started meeting up outside of the club to discuss books and life in general. It's nice to have a female friend who doesn't know anything about my history with Steven and Nancy. The yoga class has been great for my mental health. I've found that the physical exercise and mindfulness practices have helped me deal with stress and anxiety much better. I've even convinced Alex to come to a couple of classes with me, which has been both hilarious and sweet. Overall, I feel like I'm in a much better place than I was a year ago. My relationship with Nancy continues to improve, I'm happy with Alex, and I'm focused on personal growth and new experiences. There are still challenges, like dealing with Steven's occasional outbursts, but I feel more equipped to handle them now. I'm grateful for the support and advice I've received from this community throughout this journey. It's been a long and sometimes difficult road, but I finally feel like I'm moving in the right direction. I'll update again if there are any significant changes. Thanks for reading. Update 3. It's been almost a year since my last update, and I wanted to share some final thoughts on this chapter of my life. A lot has changed, and I feel like I've finally found some peace with the whole situation involving Steven and Nancy. My relationship with Alex has continued to grow stronger. We moved in together 3 months ago, and it's been a wonderful experience. He's incredibly supportive and understanding, especially when it comes to my past experiences. We've talked openly about what happened with Steven and Nancy, and Alex has been patient as I've worked through my trust issues. One night, after a particularly deep conversation about my past, Alex surprised me by sharing some of his own relationship baggage. He told me about an ex-girlfriend who had cheated on him in college and how it had affected his ability to trust for years afterward. Hearing his story made me feel less alone in my struggles and brought us even closer together. Nancy and I have settled into a comfortable friendship. It's different from what we had before, but in many ways it feels more authentic. We see each other regularly, usually for coffee or dinner every couple of weeks. She's become friends with Alex as well, which has been nice. Seeing her interact positively with my new partner has helped ease any lingering doubts I had about her intentions. Last month, Nancy invited Alex and me over for dinner at her new apartment. It was the first time we'd all spent an extended period together, and I was a bit nervous about how it would go. To my relief, the evening was relaxed and enjoyable. We cooked together, shared stories, and even played some board games. It felt like a new chapter in our friendship. The biggest test of our rebuilt friendship came about 2 months ago when Nancy started dating someone new. His name is Tom, and he seems like a great guy. When Nancy first told me about him, I was surprised to find that I felt genuinely happy for her rather than jealous or suspicious. It was a moment that made me realize how far we've both come. As for Steven, I'm relieved to say he's no longer a part of our lives. After his drunken outburst at the bar last year, he seemed to finally get the message that neither Nancy nor I wanted anything to do with him. I haven't heard from him in months, and Nancy says she hasn't either. It's a weight off both our shoulders. Recently, I ran into Steven's sister at the grocery store. She told me Steven had moved to another state for a job opportunity. While part of me was glad he was no longer in the same city, I found myself hoping he was doing okay and getting the help he needed. It was a surprising moment of empathy that I didn't expect to feel. Looking back on everything that's happened over the past few years, I'm amazed at how much I've grown. The betrayal I experienced was painful, but it taught me valuable lessons about self-worth, forgiveness, and the importance of surrounding myself with genuine people. I'm proud of the life I've built for myself. I have a loving partner, a fulfilling job, and a circle of friends I can truly trust. While the journey wasn't easy, I'm grateful for where it's led me. To anyone going through a similar situation, I want to say that healing is possible. It takes time, effort, and a willingness to be vulnerable, but it's worth it. Don't be afraid to set boundaries, seek support, and prioritize your own well-being. Thank you all for following my story and offering support along the way. I don't anticipate needing to post any more updates, as I feel this chapter of my life has finally come to a close. Wishing you all the best.